So instead of waggling my fingers over the Agricola board for the next 5 to 10 minutes while I explain the remainder of rules and commonly asked questions in Agricola, I am going to go to this format here where I get to actually stand and address you. So again, we're going over the gameplay section of Agricola, and I just want to address a few frequently asked questions that most people have when they first play this game. First most frequently asked question: how do I do X, where X could be anything? The answer is always take the X action. Say in the example of building fences. Build fences is an action card that shows up in Stage 1. In order to build fences, you must take your worker and place it on the Build Fences action. If this action is already taken, then you cannot take this action. You have to wait until next round when all the workers go home and attempt to take this action next time. It is as simple as that. The specifics will vary though. Some actions will allow you to do multiple things, such as the sow and or bake bread action. It all comes down to, if you ever want to do a thing, there's a thing on the board that allows you to do it. This brings us up to the next question that is most frequently asked. When does the X action come up? To determine when the X action comes up, look no further than your Game Stages summary card. This handy little devil will allow you to go through all the stages and figure out what different types of actions will become available in those stages. Keep in mind that these things are randomized throughout the game. So in Stage 1, your card says you will have the sheep action space, the sow/bake bread action space, the improvements action space, and the fences action space. Just because it lists it in this order does not mean this is the order it will come up in. They will come up in a random order, because at the beginning of the game, the stage cards from round 1 were shuffled and then placed randomly throughout. The next most frequently asked question: what order do I take actions in? Well, first off, when you've placed your worker, you then resolve the actions on the action space. If there are any actions on that action space, you must resolve them in the order listed on the card. There are 3 options that are often available on action spaces that change the order or perhaps what you are allowed to do as far as the actions go. The first one is OR. This is best outlined by the Stage 1 action card, which is Major or Minor Improvements. By taking this action space, you have your choice of building one major or minor improvement. It cannot be both, but you do have your options. You must still build them as normal, meeting all prerequisites and all costs to play the card. After that, you can play it. Another common one is AND/OR. This is best outlined by the Stage 1 action card, Sow and or Bake Bread. If you take this action space, you can sow your fields and then bake bread. You can actually do one or the other. If you did not wish to sow your fields, you could bake your bread without having to sow your fields first. You have your option of doing both in order or one or the other. Another type of action space that commonly trips people up is after something, also something. This can be best outlined by the Stage 2 action card, After Renovations, also Major or Minor Improvement. When you take this action, you perform the Renovations action. Also, you may perform a Major or Minor Improvement action. If you do not perform the Renovations action, you cannot perform the Major or Minor Improvements action. This means that if you cannot renovate, you can't play any improvements. Now I'm going to explain how to expand your house. In order to expand your house by making new rooms, you must take the Build Room action space at the top of one of the action boards. When you build a room, it must be the same material as the rest of the rooms in your house. So this means you cannot build a stone room for your wooden house, and you cannot build a wooden room for your stone house. They must be all the same building material. To renovate your house, you must take the appropriate action space, such as the one in Stage 2, which requires one reed plus one building resource for every single room in your house. When you renovate, you must renovate every single room in your house. You cannot choose to renovate some and not others. Your house must always be made of the exact same type of building material. An error that some people make is that you need one reed for every room of your house, but this is not the case. You only need one reed, and then you need one building resource for every room of your house. So upgrading a 5-room clay house to a stone house would require 1 reed and 5 stone. Common questions often resolve around cooking and baking. Your food resources, the grain and the vegetables, they can be converted to food at a 1-to-1 basis at any time. So 1 grain can be 1 food. 1 vegetable can also be 1 food. Animals cannot be eaten this way. Essentially, you'd be eating them raw. Cards that have the cooking symbol can convert vegetables and animals into food at a conversion rate listed on their card. Cooking food or animals this way can be done at any time. You do not need to take an action for it. Cards with a baking symbol on them, which is a little loaf of bread, can convert grain into their listed conversion rate after you take a bake bread action. A bake bread action must be taken in order to use the baking symbol. People often have questions about pastures. What constitutes a pasture in Agricola? As you can see here, this pasture occupies 2 spaces, here and here. It is fenced in all around here. This is considered to be 1 pasture, even though it occupies 2 spaces. Compare this to, say, this pasture, which only occupies 1 space. This is still considered to be 1 pasture. Clearly, this pasture is bigger than this pasture. However, this pasture can hold more animals, but it is still only considered to be 1 pasture. There are also a lot of conflicts about stables, and some overlooked rules about stables, and sometimes stables are just overlooked entirely. Adding a stable to a pasture actually allows that pasture to hold more animals. However, a stable that is outside of a fenced-in pasture can still be used. The stable can hold 1 animal. And although this lonely stable is not actually able to score you any points at the end of the game, it is still counted as using up a space. Therefore, you don't lose any points for having this space occupied by an unfenced-in stable. Finally, there are many variants for this game. They are all listed actually at the back of the book and a little earlier on page 8 if you're looking for the family variant. The family variant is very, very useful for introducing new players. If you are teaching someone how to play Agricola, I strongly recommend, no matter how much you think otherwise, to use the family variant, because this allows them to get the fundamentals of Agricola before they get loaded down with all the plate spinning and baggage of having improvements. If you put a new player into a game of Agricola, and you are an experienced player and they are not, and you are using improvements and occupations, you are a because you have a huge advantage over them and you are going to win. We are reviewing the standard mode of play for this review. Therefore, if you have any questions about the family variant, look no further than the instruction manual. It's not that hard to figure out. Essentially, you just use less cards and a couple different cards for the extra cards you would have on the side, the bonus action cards. You may have questions about the individual improvements and occupations that you've been dealt at the beginning of the game. I'm not going over these. I've explained the basics about all of the major, minor improvements and occupations during the earlier parts of the gameplay section here. However, for me to go over every single one of the improvements and occupations would be impossible for this review. Just refer to the manual. The instruction manual actually has a fantastic breakdown of all the conflicts and such that would evolve from the way that the improvements and occupations interact with each other. Aside from that, you don't need me for this. If you can read, you should be able to figure them out, no problem. If you have a conflict, talk to the person who owns the game. If you are the person who owns the game, make it up. Don't worry about it. If you really honestly can't figure out how it would work, just intuit something. Whatever seems most reasonable. It's only that.